Hey everybody, how's it going out there in SeaRUG land? Welcome everybody to our December SeaRUG, last of the year. My name is David Diarza. I'll be hosting the webinar today. But if you know anything about SeaRUG and me, you know that I like to get off the virtual podium over here and pass it along to our presenters and our sponsor right away. However, this being our last meeting of this very momentous 2020, I feel compelled to do say a couple of things. I just want to give everybody a big thank you for bearing with us this year with the strangeness that has been SeaRUG virtually. I know that if I need to look for a silver lining, maybe the fact that I can come to you, from the comfort of my home office, wearing my favorite T-shirt and not afraid to admit it, wearing sweatpants. Yeah, silver lining. But the reality is that I miss all of you. I miss seeing you every month at the library. I miss our wonderful venue. And the most important thing about SeaRUG to me, and I know that the rest of the board agrees with me, is quite frankly the community that we have around the Revit community and the Pacific Northwest. So here's hoping to 2021 is a little bit better. It gives us an opportunity to get back into the library and get back in person. Obviously, we're going to stay virtual for as long as we need to. We're going to abide by the whatever the state and local officials tell us to do, and there would be no point in arguing otherwise, since we meet at a public library that follows those. We're at the mercy of their policies as well. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you for joining us, virtually. And here's again hoping to seeing you all again in person in 2021. With that out of the way, I'll go through the usual steps of the Revit presentation introduction here, and then I'll get out of the way. Today we are welcoming back MICROSOL Resources and welcoming back McNeel and Associates. We've got Scott and Ehsan. They're going to show us, wow us with the ability to interact between Rhino and Revit, which to me is a really exciting topic. So I'm really looking forward to this. A big thank you also goes to our sponsors, right? If all of us as presenters and organizers and you as an audience have had to adapt to this online world, imagine what that does to our sponsors and the perceived value that they get out of SeaRUG, right? So thank you so much to all of our sponsors for sticking with us. We're going to get a little bit creative about what we do next year and how do we address this ongoing online. The flip side of it is that it's allowed us to expand our audience. This has really found a little bit of a home beyond the Seattle market, right? That you can't make it in person to the library no longer means that you are not participating in SeaRUG. So, there's a flip side to it. So that's good too. But again, thank you to all the sponsors. And thank you, of course, to the rest of the board of SeaRUG. Important work that we all do. I think we all feel very passionate about it, and we all are looking forward. I know that I speak for all of them when I say, we want to get back to seeing you in person. So thank you to everybody on the board for continuing to help to put SeaRUG together. As always, I'll remind you to check out our YouTube channel. Good content on there. We post all these meetings. I'm doing a little bit more, obviously this whole COVID thing means a little bit less access to other people collaboratively helping to put some videos together and things that we were hoping to have up there. But do subscribe to that channel. We've got big plans for it over the next coming months and years, and it's a great venue for us. And speaking of, one of the upcoming pieces of content on that channel has to do with hardware. As you know, we all had a presentation about optimizing hardware for Revit earlier in the year, and that's kind of led me down this rabbit hole of trying out some hardware. And sort of long story short, that's kind of culminated in our friends at BIMbox extending $1,000 off of any system through the end of January 2021. I'll be sending out an email to the rest of the membership about this too here after the meeting. In essence, there'll be instructions in there, but if you email them and tell them that, hey, you saw this through SeaRUG, they'll extend this offer to you. It'll probably be more of a blog than a video post, but I've been doing some testing, both the Puget Systems and BIMbox, as well as some enterprise Dell stuff, really high-end, really high-dollar hardware as it relates to Revit in particular and BIM in general workflows. And no spoilers, but there's a pretty big difference between the BIMbox offering and the comparably priced Dell Enterprise thing. Again, don't want to spoil too much, but about 20% less weighting on the click and wait. I'll save it for the video for the blog, but there's some really great advantages that make a huge difference on the day-to-day click and wait, especially when you're clicking and waiting on things that shouldn't be waiting because they're not like big models or anything like that. But because you have a big model going, the rest of the system is running really slow. So there's a pretty big difference. So check these guys out. Check out Puget Systems also, of course. They're a little bit of different philosophy, but great systems. And, good hardware for Revit does make a difference. So more to come on that. But anyway, enough from me. You've already heard me talk far more than I like to at these things. So I'm going to introduce MicroSol Resources, give you a huge thank you, and Annalisa Montenegro is going to pick it up and kind of present the rest of the story. And I'm going to put myself on mute and enjoy the show.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to make sure that you can actually see my screen. Yeah, all right, great, thanks. And again, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share with us and be part of the Seattle Revit user group. As I was just telling David and the rest of our panelists here, we were actually at the library about this time last year. So it's great to be back again. This time around, Rhino 7 is out. It's not just a work in progress, folks. We have a soft launch. Well, officially, it's not out until December 9th. Scott and Ehsan is going to give us a sneak peek on the different features, which I know you're all familiar with if you've been using the trial and the beta version, but we have a lot more to showcase to you here. On that note, I also wanted to thank everybody for joining us, because I know we were just discussing it before we went on live, that everybody else, or the panelists here, saw each other last time when we were at the Seattle Public Library in February, which is actually the last live event we've held. And I hope all of you have stayed healthy and safe during this time. And we all miss you. I myself am actually calling from my home in the suburb of New Jersey, which is just right out of New York City. So I'm glad to be sharing this with you today. Having said that, I just wanted to, again, introduce who's going to be joining us in the presentation today. It's an opportunity for you to not just hear more about the features from Joseph Freund, who's my colleague, but also an opportunity to ask definitively from Scott and Ehsan more about the latest features of Revit. So we will start shortly. Just wanted to give you or just wanted to go over a few other information too. I think I mentioned that to you. Just want to let you know that in addition to being a McNeel partner, we are also a proud partner of Autodesk. We're a platinum partner, as well as Bluebeam. And for us, basically, as a value-added reseller, our idea is to actually help you with the different design technology needs that you would need in order for you to continue with your workload. So if there's a question, or if you have a need for VR solutions like Enscape and Chaos Group for visualization, or any of these other partnerships we have, feel free to let us know and send us an email. Also, just want to let you know that we are offering training. Obviously, these days we're not able to offer it in person, but we are offering them live online. And in fact, as an extension of our service, we are offering live online training, which is instructor-led classes for our online courses, which we're also doing an on-demand training, which is an extension of that hybrid of learning. So it's an opportunity for you not just to learn it live and online, but also an opportunity for you to use it when you need it. It's basically self-paced. And also, these are some of the courses we're offering. I mentioned Revit, as well as the BIM 360 and Bluebeam, but also more importantly, the Rhino classes that we're offering. In fact, we're in the midst of creating one with Joseph, wherein we talk about the Rhino inside Revit that's more advanced and intermediate and can be customized to your own workflow. So if you have any questions about this, please let us know. Also, just wanted to mention now that you are online and able to join from your living room or wherever your home office is these days. Just want to let you know we are in partnership with the AIA New York and doing the Future of Cultural Centers webinar series. And the last one is actually the Museum of American Latino that Eduardo Rodriguez is joining us. We've been doing this series just to try and figure out what is the future of cultural centers and museums. And this one is next week on December 8th at 12 p.m. If you're interested in this and any other events, feel free to go ahead into our website under events and you can sign up there. Also, just to let you know, if you feel that you didn't get enough of what you learned here today, we are hosting another live event together with our panelists here today on the 15th of December, just in case you missed this one. Also, as David said, we'll be recording today's webinar and we will be posting it as well on our channel. And we are also providing a learning unit. So if you're interested in a certificate of completion or getting it, then send us an email at marketing@MicroSolResources and with your AIA number, or if you would prefer a certificate instead. As always, please follow us on our social media, which we will post all these other resources for you. And also just wanted to let you know these are the learning objectives that we were learned today from our webinar on V-Ray for Rhino, on Rhino inside Revit, and also the different workflows that you can use it for, including, of course. On that note, I wanted to introduce our McNeel Associates partners, Scott Davidson and also Ehsan, who can give us a bit more flavor on the new features. And Scott and Ehsan, all yours.
Thanks. I just wanted to say hi to everybody and talk about we just did release Rhino 7. It's a soft release, so you won't hear it everywhere, but Microsol has it and can sell it. And a few things to kind of questions we're getting. There's a lot of plugins that are being updated for Rhino 7 actually just this week, like Enscape and the ArchiCAD connection and many of these bigger plugins that a lot of people use, V-Ray. And so keep your eyes open for as we make this transition to Rhino 7. Rhino 7's really important to this insight technology that we're using. And otherwise, I think Joseph's going to show a lot more about 7 and talk about it. And also, Ehsan and I are here on the question panel. So if you have any questions while Joseph is presenting, feel free to type your questions in too. So,
yeah, Joseph's presentation is so captivating that I think you're not going to see too many questions. Everybody's going to be like so focused on his presentation.
It is very cool. So great. And so anyway, so with that, I just want to pass it on to Joseph.
All right. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Ehsan and Annalisa, for that wonderful introduction. I'll just get started right here. I think everybody can see my screen. I just want to run through the agenda here real quick. I'll just go with a quick introduction and kind of an introduction to the resources that are available, particularly those on McNeel's website. Cover some setup and installation, some requirements, and then do a quick review of the interface, and then just jump into a few of the workflow examples that really just give you a flavor, a little taste of what is possible through this technology. And then we'll wrap it up with Q&A. All right. So to get started, Rhino Inside Revit is an add-in for Revit, very much like any other add-ins that you may have installed, like V-Ray, PyRevit, Enscape. So it'll be, you will find it in the add-ins tab within Revit once it is installed. And now what McNeel has done with Rhino 7 is rebuild it so that it can exist as a plugin in the memory space of another program. In this case, I'll be covering how it has been done with Revit, but it's really fascinating what they've done with Rhino 7. Really what this allows is just provides a whole new kind of landscape to engage with the design process, particularly if the deliverable needs to be a Revit model, or if most of the projects are in Revit. Alternatively, it can be this can open the doors for Revit users to make use of the wonderful tools provided by Rhino 7 and Grasshopper, and the many plugins that are available in that ecosystem. On that note, there are lots of wonderful plugins at foodforrhino.com, and that's where you can find a lot of those plugins that Scott had mentioned, in addition to Visual Arc, which is a BIM plugin for Rhino 7, and that is compatible with Rhino inside Revit. So I would stay tuned for more information on that. Now, for these guides and resources, I really think that the website here just has a lot of great content. So this is the main page here. Let me just maximize. So it gives you a quick introduction to the tool. There are these guides here that are just a wealth of knowledge. It's a work in progress, but there is a lot of great learning content on here, both for Rhino inside Revit, but also I think it's a great guide to learning more about Revit and the Revit API. So I would definitely check this out. There's also some videos in the Discover tab here, made by those at McNeel, and then different videos from other users in the community. You'll find some past recordings there, and then some resources. There's a link to the YouTube channel and the discussion forum. So if you run into any issues with Rhino inside Revit, feel free to post there, and that really gives the developers at McNeel a chance to either resolve any issues that are in this tool, but it's a great way to engage with the community as well. And all of the information is up on, or all of the code is up on GitHub at rhino.inside-revit. Okay, and let me alt tab back here. So setup and installation. This is a tool that's compatible with Revit 2017 to 2021. If you have a license of Rhino 7, you can use it. Otherwise, you can try a 90-day evaluation. And right now, the Rhino inside Revit is in beta and is freely available on McNeel's website. And then once that installs, it's a super quick download and installation. Once it installs, you'll get that message in Revit saying that an add-in has been installed, and you just need to choose Always Allow, and you should be good to go. And then once you have it installed, it'll appear within the Add-ins tab. So you want to go to the Add-ins, and then you'll be able to start up the plugin. And I'll show you that once we get to the interface here. But before I get into it, I just want to cover these few functions. This is really what I see as the main abilities of Rhino inside Revit. You can access and edit Revit model information. So if you have any existing models out there, you can both access the information, extract it, send it out to whatever other service or database that you want. You can also create new Revit elements from Rhino and Grasshopper. And I think anybody familiar with using Dynamo will understand how useful it can be to be able to control the elements from kind of another space. This kind of is a great extension to that, because it provides the wealth of tools available in Grasshopper, but also you have the full Rhino 7, operating as a plugin there. So you have a model space that you can manipulate objects, send it through to Grasshopper, and then all the way through to Revit. And then you can also create Rhino geometry from Revit model elements. So really, depending on what your main program of choice is, I think this gives a lot of flexibility for expanding to new territory. And if you have some plugins that are exclusively for Rhino, then I think that third one will be very useful. Let's say you have V-Ray for Rhino, you can send all of the geometry into from the Revit model into Rhino, and then do your renderings from there. Okay, so let's get started here. Let me find the Revit window. So this is the advanced sample project created by Autodesk, and this is the model I will be using to kind of demonstrate some of these features. So right now I've already opened up Revit. I've already started the plugin here, but as I mentioned, you'll find the Rhino inside Revit within the add-ins tab in Revit, and you'll just start it by clicking this, and then this rhinoceros tab will appear, giving you these different options. Now I'll go left to right here. You've got your help here, which has sample files, some additional resources, which may be some of them the same as those that you'd find on the McNeel website that I showed you before. Additionally, you can open up Rhino window directly here. And again, this is the full operating version of Rhino 7. So that's pretty cool. You've got this model space. So let's go back here. You can also import 3DM files. These are Rhino files into Revit. And this really allows for much better geometry coming in because it is directly from the software that created it, and because through the technology of Rhino inside Revit, it's able to handle a lot of the differences between how each program handles geometry. Additionally, you can toggle the visibility here with the preview. You've got a Python window that you can access to control your Rhino model, but additionally, there is the Grasshopper window, which is really, it might be the main window that you'd be working with in this tool, in addition to the Rhino window. But I'll open that up here just to show you what that interface looks like. So you've got your main canvas space here, all of your components up top, and you have a ribbon with just a nice wealth of functionality here. So I'll go ahead and minimize this and continue with some of these. You additionally have some visibility toggles here, so you can turn off visibility. You can toggle the solver, which is very similar to in Dynamo, either turning the process from automatic, that it would automatically process the script, or whether you would have it manually process. So I'll just go ahead and unlock that again, and then you have some more functions here to determine which category, if you were to bake some items, so send some geometry from Rhino or Grasshopper into Revit, so you can choose the category here before baking. Additionally, just like similar to the Dynamo player, there's this Grasshopper player, which would allow you to open up any Grasshopper definition and run it without actually having to open the Grasshopper window. Okay, so without any further delay here, let's just open up Grasshopper and start going through some of these examples. So this first example here is what I'm calling the Revit Grasshopper round trip. So I will be taking some information from the Revit model, referencing that in Grasshopper, performing some manipulation in Grasshopper, and then sending that back into Revit as a roof object. So let me just snap this off to the side and zoom in here. So these are a couple items here. Now I thought I had, my apologies, I thought I had bifocals activated, but I'll check that out in a second. So these are edges, Revit edges, or these are Rhino inside Revit components, and I've tried to show that here where we have all of the Rhino inside Revit components to the left of this border, and then to the right of this border, and everything in between are Grasshopper components. So I'll just zoom in here. So this is an edge, represents a Revit edge, and I've already assigned these, but I'll go ahead and show you kind of how that goes here. So I'll just zoom in to an area here, and what I want to do is take a couple edges from this roof, because maybe I don't like this roof for whatever reason. I want to make some modifications, so I'm just going to pull a couple edges from this, make some modifications in Grasshopper, and then push it back in. So what I'll do here is just right-click, set one edge, and I'm going to select that edge. There we go, and I'll do the same with the other, set one edge, and there we go. So now I have both of those edges referenced in here. Now if I snap, let me snap this Grasshopper window off to the left so that I can see my Rhino space, and you can see right there that I have a couple edges. Now because I've only referenced those two edges, that's all that appears here. So that's just an important piece to understand here. So I've got these two edges referenced, and I'm then feeding those into a Grasshopper definition here. Now I'm not going to go through everything that's happening here, but what I'm essentially doing is taking these two edges, dividing the space between them, and creating an array of curves or edges along there so that I can manipulate their positions and then generate new geometry from that. So like I said, I've got, let me just zoom in here. So I've divided the space there. I first created a line, divided that line into a series of points, and then I'll feed those points into, well, what I've done here is then create an array of lines, and then let's turn that off. And then I have a graph mapper here, which will allow me to manipulate the position of each of these lines here. And then in the end, I will loft and extrude these lines. So let's see what I've got going here. So I've, based on their position, I'm going to loft them up into the air, or move them up into the air. And as you can see, if I modify these parameters here with the graph mapper, you can see how that changes. I can also change the height of all of these lines. And you know what? Instead of seeing just these lines, let's see the end output here, the extruded roof. So there's the roof, and I can continue to make these modifications just in Grasshopper however I like. I can also, instead of just viewing that in the Rhino space, I can view the preview in the Revit model space as well. So as you can see, it shows up a similar way that it showed in the Rhino model space with the red preview there. So that gives me an idea of what this is going to look like. I'll go ahead and hide that again here. And then now we're ready to push it back into Revit as a roof. So what I'm doing here with these Rhino inside Revit components is feeding in that geometry that I've created, and I'm feeding that into a component here called add geometry direct shape. So this is just going to create a direct shape within Revit. And let me just maximize this so that we can you can see all of the different Rhino inside Revit components that are across the top. Now there are some more as you expand these panels out, but like I said, this direct shape is right in the Revit tab under the direct shapes. So some other things that I'm feeding into here, I'm specifying the category, so I'm putting this on the roof, and then I'm giving it a name. So I'm ready now to enable this component, and then that's going to create the direct shape within Revit. Now, if I go to Revit, I can go ahead and select this, and you can see that it's on the category layer, and it's just, it's really no different. I mean, this is a direct shape, so it's a little different, but I'm creating Revit objects because Rhino inside Revit is able to convert these objects. And it's able to interface with the Revit API directly, so that this is all native to Revit. Let's go back in here to the Grasshopper window. So this is how the direct shape can be created. And even with this creation, it might be just suffer a little bit with performance, but I can go ahead and make these changes here just the same. Now I'll just unselect that and go back here. So you can kind of get a sense for how interactive this can be between Rhino and Revit and Grasshopper. So let's say that this is at a good state that I want it in, or maybe I can rotate to see it in a better position, but I can then be at a point where I can start replacing. I can remove this roof and start replacing it accordingly. Okay, and go back in here. Now, additionally, after the creation of the roof object, I can modify the parameters for this roof. So I'll just go ahead and select this roof again. As you can see, under Mark, it shows Mark Test, and that is what I have done with this component here, which is the set element parameter component. And I can just confirm that that works by deleting this, going back to Grasshopper, and then just making sure that that component is run again. Now I may need to actually unselect that and run it again. So now for Mark, it should show as Mark Test. So this is a very powerful thing, not just for a single element, but you can control multiple elements, and it can be very powerful, not just for the Mark parameter, but for pretty much any parameter associated with Revit element. And that could be a dimension parameter, it can be a material parameter, many different options there. So go back into Grasshopper here. Okay, so that's the roof example. Now what I additionally want to do here is show a slightly different workflow where we're using some panels from this curtain wall. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, and let's say I just want to perform a study where, let's say I want to create a skywalk between this third floor, right in this upper corner, and this third floor. Maybe it just takes too long to walk all the way around the building. I don't know, for whatever reason, you want to build a skywalk here. So I'm going to open up Grasshopper here, and I'm going to select some panels that are in the model. Now I've already selected these, so I won't go through the process of reselecting those, but I'll just make these visible so that they can be seen within the Rhino model space. So there you can see I've selected some of these panels here and some here. And what I'm going to do is use a new feature within Rhino 7, which is sub-D modeling. So what I've done in each case is create a bounding box that is a union of all of those 6 panels that I've selected each, and then I'm going to bake these into the Rhino model space. So I'm going to use this component bake objects from Elefront. Go ahead and bake that. So now if I snap this off to the side, you can see that this is now a Revit or a Rhino sub-D object. And now from here, I can use the new feature bridge, which is going to create a bridge between 2 surfaces on these sub-D objects. So what I'll do is just type in the bridge command, as you can see up above, and now it's asking me for the first set of edges or faces to bridge. I'll go ahead and select this face, press enter, select the face on the other sub-D box over here, and now it has created that bridge between the two. Now this has a new dialog box here that is opened up, and I can determine the number of segments between. Maybe I'll make it, no, I'll go for 8 or 6 here, and then you can have them join to the ends there, or you can add a crease at the end as well. So I'll remove the crease, have it join. If there is any amount of like this is creating a straight bridge across, but I can make some straightness modifications with this slider here. So I'll go ahead and press OK. So now I have a sub-D bridge coming across here. Now what's really nice about sub-D modeling is the ability to make very fluid modifications. So if in Rhino, if I go ahead and click Control-Alt, and then I select just an edge here. Let's try that again. Not sure why this isn't going through here. Maybe my control is not working. Sorry, Control-Shift. My apologies. Control-Shift, and then I'll be able to select one of the edges in this sub-D. Now watch what happens when I just use the gumball to bring this up into the Z dimension a little bit. So you can see how that has resolved, and I can go ahead and select additional faces here. Now what I may want to do here is make my C-plane in line with this face here, so that when I select this, I can use the gumball to just pull this out. Maybe I want to do that on both sides. Make a little bulge halfway through on the bridge, just so that it maybe to create a little meeting space out there. Okay, so there's our bridge. Now this is only in the Rhino model space at this point, but what I can do is pretty much the same as what I did with the roof, is send this back into Revit through these Rhino inside Revit components. Now I'll be using the same component, add geometry direct shape. So I'll go ahead and enable that. Whoops, forgot a step here. So go ahead and disable that. What I need to do is actually reference this sub-D within Grasshopper. So I'll just right click, set one sub-D, and then enable. So now it has sent that sub-D into Revit, and we can just confirm by coming over here. Let me just turn off the preview visibility there so that you can see how this this bridge now appears within Revit. So that's a nice way to work with the new features within Rhino 7 and sub-D modeling, and make use of the very advanced geometry engine that Rhino has. And I think it's very useful to have a separate model space to be working on forms and geometry. It just adds more flexibility here. Now, in this case, this might not be what we want. We may either need to prune that tree or cut it down altogether. So maybe we want a design that goes around this tree so that we can preserve what has spent years growing there. So what I can do, even though I've created this object within the Revit model space, I can go back into Grasshopper and actually back into the Rhino model space. And I'll just do Shift Control again here. And I'm going to select top left to bottom right. And I still have that C-plane in that direction. So I'm going to use this, this blue axis here to just pull this out a little bit, because I know, well, actually, I don't know where that tree is. So maybe I want some of that information to show within the Rhino model space. So what I'm going to do in here in Grasshopper is bring in some of those trees. Now I know that those trees are plantings, so I'll need to specify a model category here. So this defaults to generic models, but I can go down and pick any category. So I'll go down to plantings. And then what I want to do is query the, I want to go to element, and I want to query the elements. But I want to filter it. I only want to query the elements that are plantings. So what I'll need to do is apply a filter here, category filter to be specific. I will plug in this planting into the categories node of this filter component. And I'll feed that filter into the query elements component. So this now has brought all of the elements that are in the category planting into this component here. And what I can do is then create Rhino geometry from that. So I'll just type in element geometry. It's this one. And what this does is create Rhino geometry from these elements. Now, right now, this is just in Grasshopper, but since its preview is on, I can go ahead and see what that looks like in the Rhino model space. So I can see all of my plantings there. So now I can have I can have more information to make this design decision. So I'll go ahead and do what I did before. Let's see, I'll change my C-plane back to a side here. I'll do Control Shift and select from top left to bottom right. Then I'm going to pull that out just so that it's going to miss that tree, so we can preserve that nice tree there. Maybe just a little bit more. So you can see how that sub D resolved there, and I can make any other modifications that I see fit. Maybe I can just select a face here and then perform a little rotation, maybe even bring that a little bit further up in the Z dimension. So you get an idea of the flexibility that this provides. Just make sure I didn't. That was a little bit wonky, so I'll just Control Z that. But you can get a sense for how working with sub-D modeling can be very useful. So now I've made these changes in the Rhino model space. Now I need to go back to Revit to make those changes there. But because I've created those connections within Grasshopper, it's already done everything that it's already modified what I've modified in the Rhino model space. So that's live linking between them. So that's a nice, very nice feature there. And it really just a quick way to visualize this. I can go even deeper and rationalize this bridge and maybe even add some structure beneath it, because that's quite a span there with curvature. So that would be quite the structural engineering project, but a neat little feature there. So that's pretty much the Rhino, the Revit to Rhino and Grasshopper round trip. So go ahead and just save that and close and proceed on to the next next workflow example here. So what we can also do is work with adaptive components. So what's happening here is that I've created a definition where I'm using the initial geometry is this hexagon here, and what I've done is just create some space out in the lawn here where I'm going to create this this structure. And what I want to create here is a space frame that uses adaptive components that are driven by Grasshopper points. So now with that bridge, I might want to just change the position of that of this just slightly. Let me just, no, I think it'll be fine. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just taking in this hexagon. I'm using one of the new components in Rhino 7, the quad remesh, and I'll just show you what that really does. It's taking in that hexagon and then subdividing it into a series of quads, so four-sided polygons that also have 4 vertices, of course. And then I am plugging those boundaries into a Grasshopper component called Kangaroo. And all of these components here are Kangaroo components. And what I'm doing is specifying some physical forces that will be applied to each of those line segments that are part of those quads, and then applying a lifting force. So I want to create some sort of pavilion that resolves very similarly to how a catenary shape is. So I'll go ahead and let's see here. I'm just going to disable that real quick and just reset. All right, let's not show that again. Okay. So now you can see I've run one iteration of this simulation. And if I didn't mention that, that's what Kangaroo is. It is a simulator where you can apply these physical forces. So if I go ahead and play this trigger, you can see how that simulation is run, and I can reset it at any time. I can go back then and modify some of these forces applied. As you can see, it's probably going to intersect with that bridge, so I might want to bring this lifting force down just a tad so that it's going to be under that. There's a poor placement of that hexagon, but we live and learn. So if I had more time, I would reposition that, but I'll just go ahead and proceed with some of these additional components here. So after I've created this this wireframe space frame, which is set up in a series of quads, so 4 points, I can take those 4 points and then drive an adaptive component that has 4 adaptive points. And that's what I'm doing right down here on the Rhino Inside Revit side. So I have this add component adaptive, which is available right here under the Revit tab, under the build panel. And really all I need to do is specify the which adaptive component I want to use. In this case, I'm going to select the adaptive component no panel, which is really just going to be a frame, and this is all under the curtain panel category. So I will go ahead and I will enable this component right here so that all of those points flow through, and then I can go ahead and enable this component, which will effectively create all of those adaptive components driven by those series of 4 points. Now, this is going to take just a little bit of time, and what I've done is I've created a different example that uses adaptive components, but also applies materials. And there's just a lot going on here, I know, and I know I've gone through this very quickly, but I just want to kind of showcase what's possible with this. So this is a very similar script where I have some some closed poly curve to begin with. I'm doing a quad remesh, applying the simulation forces, and then later on I create the adaptive components. Now in this case, I'm also modifying parameters associated with that adaptive component to either open or close the panel portion of this adaptive component. So as you can see, if these panels that are created here are oriented more vertically, then it'll be a much wider, more open panel. If it's more horizontal, so in this kind of roof situation, it'll be more closed. And if I go back to the Grasshopper definition, that's really what I'm determining here is the parameter that defines that thickness for each one of these adaptive components. And then down here, I am modifying that parameter for each of those created adaptive components. And then later on, I am modifying some of the material properties of these adaptive components. And these are some of the newer and neater features of Rhino inside Revit. So what I'm doing is modifying the appearance asset. I am creating a new material from a template, which is the glass template here. And so all of these right here are Rhino inside Revit components. Everything preceding is just Grasshopper components. And what I'm really doing is taking the glass material and just modifying the tint of that glass material. And I determine that color from this image sampler, which is in Grasshopper. So I've just placed these PNG images onto the Grasshopper canvas. It is able to detect the RGB values of each of the pixels there. And then I can modify that PNG, or I can have those RGB values then drive the newly created appearance assets and apply them to these new materials. And then in the end, I modify the parameter that I've created that's associated with the panel on each of these adaptive components. So if I want to change the material qualities of these, I can do so very easily just by changing this node here, and this should update shortly here. But it's a nice way to manage a lot of these parameters and assets that are in your Revit model, both create and manage what is there. So very powerful tool. So this will just take a quick second here, but it should update shortly. We'll just regenerate the view there, and I have all new colors and applied to the glass materials. Oop. Let's bring that back into view. Select that so I can rotate nicely. So that's our MicroSol Resources logo there, just with some slightly different colors applied. Now I can go back here and apply even more variation with this PNG. This has a little more gradient, so it's ultimately going to create more colors, but but in this example, I've actually created these materials to have the same name. So if you're creating a material with the same name, it's just going to overwrite that previous material. So I think in this case, it's going to create about 20 to 30 new materials to apply here, which it may seem like a lot to then manage, but if you're managing it from in this way, in this parametric way, then it can be much more fluid. Now this may take just a little bit longer, so I may just switch back to the other example just to see if this is generated. Yep, this has created these adaptive components from that previous example. And as you can see, it's just created that nice space frame there. And just like in the other example I was just showing, I can then, after I've created these adaptive component instances, I can modify their parameters. So here I've got the panel thickness that I have calculated. I've determined what that parameter needs to be for each one of those adaptive components. And then if I go ahead and enable that here, I can see that update across all of those instances. And again, this is just a single family, single adaptive component family that I'm modifying the instance parameters to create this variation in each one of these. So I'll just, I'll give that another second here. Might just flip back to the other one here to see if it's finished. Yep, this one's finished. So as you can see, there's a little more variation in the colors of these panels. So just a lot of flexibility in setting up your model, driving and creating new components, and then modifying the parameters accordingly, either to change its appearance or any sort of dimensional quality there. Okay, if I switch back here, should be regenerating shortly here. And one other thing to note about all of these elements created through Rhino inside Revit, when they come into Revit, they come in pinned, which is really a good idea because it makes sure that everything just stays in its rightful position there. But yeah, as you can see here, it has applied those parameters to each one of these instances. So those panels that are a little more horizontal are more closed up, and those that are a little more vertical are opened up there. So a neat way to work with the Revit specific elements, the adaptive components, but using the Grasshopper technology to drive it. Okay, so we're about up to the hour here. That really came up quickly. Should we proceed with more workflow examples, or should we kind of loop back to the presentation? I'll cover some resources, and then we can go with a Q&A.
Hi, Joseph. That was really comprehensive. I was actually going to defer to David. Perhaps you can let us know about timing. David?
Yeah. I just think out of respect for everybody's time, I hate to say it, but let's move back to the presentation. This is so impressive. There's no way you can do justice to this in just an hour, right? So, but I think that it's given a really good flavor of what the possibilities are. And I, for one, continue to be incredibly impressed. And not only that, but also I would say Grasshopper wins my award for best user interface, that context menu. I do want to know what that fried egg looking like icon is, though.
Oh, that is the bake. So that's
awesome.
baking your components. So bringing it from Grasshopper into the Rhino model space, or from Grasshopper into Revit. So
awesome.
Yeah, the icons are really great. I think it gives another piece of information that you can quickly. It's kind of like landmarks. You can quickly recognize what it is, and yeah, very useful. So here are some resources. I'll just go ahead and copy these into the chat box, but I'll go over these real quick. Most of these are just right from McNeel's website, either the McNeel forums. There are many. I mean, follow them on YouTube. A lot of great videos there, as well as Vimeo, and yeah. So let's cover any questions that people have.
And I'm going to ask Scott and Ehsan to see if they have any questions that they wanted to share, because I know they've been answering some of them online. Also, Joseph, thanks for sharing the resources. I wanted to let everybody know that, well, I know you're sharing it in your chat box. I also shared a link to a blog that you created that has a listing of all these resources too. And sorry, they are saying you also shared in the Dropbox folder all the file here, if somebody had requested it last time, right? And the script. Did you want to talk about that?
Right. Yep. So in that link, there should be some Dropbox files. There may be one more workflow example that I didn't cover here in there, but it's all very similar. I don't think the bridge and sub D example is in there, but I will go ahead and add that in. Should be no problem. And I'll just go ahead and paste those resources in the chat box as well. Whoop, Annalisa, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, sorry. While you're pasting the resource, Greg wants to find out regarding the bridge, does it have to be a mass object in Revit?
A mass object in Revit, does it have to be? It
yeah.
Well, you can assign it to any category that is appropriate to whatever object you're designing. But there are also, through Rhino inside Revit, you can create walls directly. It won't come in as a mass. It'll be a Revit wall, and you can do that very similar to how Dynamo works, where you provide a planar curve, and then it will generate that wall.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. That's actually the nice part about Rhino inside Revit, is that with the geometry you're creating in Rhino, there's so many ways to get it over to Revit, whether you want it to be native, or you want it to be part of a family, or you want it to be a direct shape, or there's all these different pieces. The mass question comes up, and you can get in it as a mass and make it a wall. But you can also, like Joseph showed, you can drive panels on top of it and just take the panels over to Revit. And then as you change the sub D in Rhino, then the panels update in Revit. So there's many different ways to do this, depending on, what you need, where you are in the BIM process. If it's early in the process, for competition, or early on, you might use direct shapes more. And then as you work down through the process, maybe you need more native objects in the process, and you can adjust that based on the Grasshopper definition.
Sounds great. And I'm also so much more also respectful of the time here. I know, like David said, he wanted to make sure we wrap up in time. David, do you have another time for a couple more questions, or do you want to just wrap it up and I can make you the presenter?
No, let's do a couple of questions. I see that the questions have been kind of answered in the Q&A panel as we go along, but it's good for people to hear them as well, right? So if you want to pick a couple there, absolutely.
Sure. Let's double checking here. Are you able to apply the Revit curtain wall to that Rhino sub-D bridge? And I think Ehsan said yes, right? If you bring that bridge as a mass, then you can apply a curtain wall system to it. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to explain it on the questions. We have Scott has created a really good guide on the wiki for Rhino inside Revit that sort of explains all the different approaches and methods that you can use to bring geometry from Rhino inside Revit. Obviously, the best way is to use the native Revit elements because they adopt the Revit behavior that we all know, like a wall behaves like a wall and merges and joins with other walls and all that kind of stuff. The problem is that sometimes the API is limited, so you can't, like, if you want to create a very complex geometry as a roof, more often than not, you won't be able to use the Revit API to create a native roof to, have it editable and all that kind of stuff. So in those cases, Revit's answer to these challenges is basically providing the direct shape. Direct shape acts like a container that can contain any sort of geometry, but it doesn't understand what the geometry is, so it won't be able to attach the behavior. It still categorizes it correctly. So if it's a roof, it's going to show up in your roof schedules and all that kind of stuff. But you won't be able to double click on it and start editing it.
Sounds great. And in fact, that's kind of like dovetailing with Jeff's question earlier on, right? Like what kind of Revit object is created for this roof element. And that's what you were mentioning about direct shape too.
Yeah, so you can do a roof can be native, direct shape, just depending on how you set it up and what you can do. And some of it's working with Revit's limitations, but there's a lot of things like what we're doing even with direct shapes is you can go through and change the graphic qualities of the direct shapes and the cuts and things like that using view filters now, and you can set that all up in Grasshopper and that allows you to adjust graphically what's happening in your drawings from Grasshopper actually.
And you're all for those specific questions that come related to the creating walls and current walls by face, because it's such a popular thing to do in Revit and important. We're also working on creating a wall by face kind of component. They don't have to worry about the masses and all that kind of stuff. It'll auto-generate the mass from the face that you pick from any face that you pick in Rhino, and it will be able to generate that wall by face for you.
I'm sorry, did you say that that's part of now the new feature, or is that the thing to come?
We're working on it. If you look at if anybody wants to play with this, there's an issue on the Rhino inside Revit repo that has a Python component attached to it that does this for walls. But we have to we're waiting for the finishing the element binding that holds a record of all the elements that Rhino inside Revit creates inside the Revit model, and this all these create components are kind of tied to that mechanism. So we are testing that out, make sure that works, and then after that we'll be able to add a whole bunch of new create components.
So anyway, speaking of, again, it just ties into the last question, which is PyRevit going to interface with Rhino within Revit?
Yeah.
Perfect question, Ehsan.
So PyRevit will give you a Python environment and C# environment, so you could technically import, the DLLs and Rhino inside Revit or Rhino, or just like, the way you do it with Revit APIs, and start using it in your Python script. PyRevit also gives you this capability that you can throw a Grasshopper definition inside a PyRevit bundle. Instead of a Python script or a C# script, you can just throw something in there that says like script.gh, and that's your Grasshopper definition file. And you can use PyRevit to deploy this to your users. Every time they click on the button, it'll use the Rhino inside Revit on that machine to execute that definition for you.
Sounds great. It sounds like it's the perfect last question here for everybody else. And I just wanted to thank again Joseph for presenting, and also Scott and Ehsan for giving us an insight, not just of the latest features, but also of the things to come on your soon-to-come wish list. And David, I'll pass it on to you. I hope everybody else stays happy and healthy. Enjoy your holidays, and see you soon in Seattle in 2021.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Thanks, Annalisa, and thank you to MicroSol Resources. And Joseph, that was really great. I've been so impressed with, and so I kind of wish that my job involved doing more of this, right? But I'm much more concerned about how to actually hold that bridge up, what foundation you're going to need, and to actually pour the concrete into it. So I don't get to do some of the fun shape stuff, but it's just so fantastic, and hope everybody enjoyed it. And Ehsan and Scott, thank you so much for for participating today and for putting this together. And again, to all of you at home or wherever you might be watching us from, thank you so much for sticking with SeaRUG during this time in this year. And again, my many thanks to you and to all of our sponsors, of course. And like Annalisa said, happy holidays to everybody. We really hope for a better 2021. And speaking of, we're going to stick to our same schedule, so we're going to skip January, but go straight into February, and we'll do the third Wednesday of the month, whether it be online here on a webinar format or eventually at the library. We'll get there just as soon as we're allowed. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon and great holidays and end of the year, and we'll see you in 2021. Thanks. Bye-bye.